For years now, many leftists and the Islamic world have been pushing the narrative that the United States is an imperialist force, and they have been very successful at creating that assumption globally. They refer to United States and its allies as imperialist West. It's interesting how the lack of challenge against that narrative, in so many conversations, people just refer to United States as Western imperialism as if that is the common understanding and an obvious truth. But the interesting thing is that not only that is not true, the United States is actually the greatest anti-imperial force that has ever existed from its beginning and today. To be clear, I don't even think the word imperialist is a negative. The time of empires were a necessary transition that history had to go through. However, just in the way that empires were necessary, the end of the age of empires were also necessary, and now we are in the age of nation states. And empires were useful for their time, but they're now outdated, and now it's the nation state model that is working and provides the highest utility. And it's the United States that got us through that transition. It's important to understand what we're even talking about when we mentioned imperialism, because some people just metaphorically use the word empire to show a lot of influence and power, and then, okay, by that definition, United States is an empire, but that's not what really the word empire and imperialism means. And then after that, I'll show you really quickly how not only United States is not an empire, but they are the main reason why we ended the age of empires, and how United States continues to fight against empires. For you to be an empire and to do imperialism, you need to be governing over people that do not give you consent to govern over them. You need to have a state or a governing body that is not really a reflection of the people that is governing. By consent, we don't necessarily mean voting. You might have like empire with no voting at all, but you have a central citizenry within the capital that the state is a reflection of. The consent comes in different forms. For example, lack of an uprising or lack of resistance or complaint, or a demonstration of respect or legitimacy of the governing body, but usually have certain citizens where the empire does actually reflect and it's largely beneficial to those citizens. But then you have these other territories that you're ruling over, and the rulers do not really reflect the people within these territories. So sovereignty and political capital comes from a core group of people at the center of the empire, and sovereignty doesn't really belong to the people in these other territories that you're ruling over by force. So just because empires had vast territories that they could rule over, people look at United States and the level of influence it has globally in so many other countries than the United States itself, that people think that is empire because the reach is global, the influence is global, and United States hasn't been elected by the people within these countries. They call that empire. People call it new imperialism. But I think if you call that imperialism, or modern form of imperialism, all you're doing is you're referring to any country that becomes richer and more powerful will naturally have more influence globally, and now you're referring to them as imperialists just because they have figured out a way to have a stronger economy, a bigger military, and a more powerful culture for them to be this influential globally. But then if you do that, then you are redefining imperialism to just mean being successful. The main element of imperialism traditionally was lack of consent. But United States influence globally is either with consent or against a tyrant that doesn't have the consent of its people. To be fair, United States sometimes does work with tyrants, but that doesn't negate the first 2 points I made. It's either with consent, and wherever it has been without consent of the rulers, that ruler was already violating the consent of the people it was ruling over. The sovereignty already was taken away from the people. It would not be imperialism to take action against a ruling body that doesn't get its political power from the people. In fact, if you take action against such a ruler, you might be helping moving political power to the people, which is the most anti-imperial thing you could do. United States uses its military power, its economic power, and its cultural power as an offer that other countries could choose to buy or take advantage of if they consent to it. As long as they're a democracy, United States uses its economy, its military, and its culture, all of them being very powerful forces, the most powerful globally in all three areas, as an offer rather than forcing it upon anybody. The citizens of every country and the governments of every country can choose to accept it or not, unless they are tyrants who are taking actions against the United States, then United States might use its military might and or its economic might to take actions against those rulers. But again, when that happens, that is not really a violation of the sovereignty of the people belonging to that country, because usually countries that do that to United States are not democracies. If historically you had empires bringing in their armies to invade and capture certain territories and making the people of that area and their resources serve the empire, what we have right now is the United States having a giant military, and other countries could choose to accept United States offer for providing them with security by either United States having military bases in your country, or doing military contracts with, buying weapons, or sharing intelligence. But any country could choose to take advantage of United States military might, and also at the same time any country could choose to benefit from the customer base that is the United States citizens, which is the wealthiest customer base with the highest purchasing power that every country would want to have access to. And the United States has the right and the ability to give you access or remove your access to that customer base. And the whole world wants access to that customer base. Every country wants to be able to sell to the United States and buy from the United States. When the United States puts sanctions on you, people think that's the United States forcing its way upon other countries. But that would only be true if you think having access to US economy is a right rather than a privilege. The United States has its own market. The United States has its own economy. You having access to their economy is a privilege. If the United States decides to use its giant markets, to use its giant customer base and its great economy to remove favors from you, if you think that they shouldn't be able to do, that's the world forcing its way on the United States rather than the other way around. This is on the table by the United States for you if you want. And if you suffer significantly because your actions means that the United States doesn't want to provide you with protection or its economy or its culture, that is not an indication that the United States is being unfair to you or that the United States is doing imperialism. That's an indication of how worse the world would be without the United States in it. If a country suffers because the United States is removing its military base from there or reducing their economic relationship with them, that is not oppression. That is you just being so used to this privilege that you had and you were ungrateful for having it, and now you think that losing that privilege is United States doing imperialism on you. It used to be that a foreign military presence in your territory or their economic activity in your territory was imperialism because it was by force and without consent. But now these leftists and the Islamic world is trying to convince us that the military presence that is by consent in your country or the economic activity that is by consent in your country is just a new way of imperialism. That is ridiculous. You have chosen this. Not only that, some people go as far as saying that removing the military is now imperialism, or removing the economic activity that you have in a country is now imperialism. This is just a negative view on success, which is a very leftist thing to do. United States has chosen the methods and the values that has made it powerful and rich enough for the rest of the world to need it, and this comes from this leftist mentality that if you're powerful and rich, you must be on the wrong side of history, and a lot of it just comes from jealousy. But beyond that, United States is also the greatest power against imperialism. From its foundation, the American Revolution was an anti-imperialist revolution, and that anti-imperialism became part of its DNA. The nation-state model that evolved from the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment in Europe, and then the attempt of making it a thing with the French Revolution, originally failed in Europe, and it was implemented by the American Revolution. And the nation-state model in practice was born in the United States. And then after that, winning World War I and then World War II and the Cold War made the nation-state model the dominant model all over the world. Almost every land on earth right now is being governed under this nation-state model, which is an anti-imperial model. The nation-state model is what replaced the Age of Empire, which was created by the United States. Every country that you're in, every single parliament, having presidents, having prime ministers, having an executive branch, a judiciary branch, a legislative branch, the separations of power, all of this, even though these ideas were created in Western Europe, it was successfully implemented and turned into the nation-state model by the United States. The United States is, in effect, the first nation-state. And now every territory, almost every territory on earth is the nation nation state model that America began. It was the United States that provided us with the model that replaced empires. But even after that, to this day, it's the United States that is fighting against potential empires, the coming back of empires. Let's think about this. What are the main imperial forces right now? If we go to our original understanding of what imperialism is, again, I reject these modern definitions of new imperialism because it just calls success and having power imperialism. To me, imperialism requires you violating the sovereignty of a group of people and ruling over them without their consent. And here's the key part: without them threatening you first. If you're occupying a land because that land is being used constantly to threaten your citizens and there is no governing body there to stop that from happening, then you have every right to go and occupy that land, because as a sovereign nation state, you have a responsibility as the state to the nation to protect them from threats. But without that threat, for you to be an empire, you require violating the sovereignty of a group of people that don't give you consent governing over them. Basically, in a modern sense, it requires you violating the border integrity of another nation state and governing over a group of people without them wanting you to do so. Right now we have four main examples of people trying to do that. Two of them is Islamic, Shia and Sunni. The Sunni one is the people trying to bring back the Islamic State. The Sunni version of that is many Sunnis unsuccessfully trying to bring back the Islamic State in a Caliphate version of it, the most famous of that being ISIS. The Shia example of that is the Islamic Republic, but it's pretty transparent imperialist agendas, a pan-Islamist Shia empire that they already have been very successful at doing for a while. Before the fall of Assad, the Islamic Republic, one way or another, ruling to different degrees over Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and they were very transparent about wanting to expand this to the Arab countries around the Persian Gulf, especially Saudi Arabia, to Africa, South America, and eventually the entire world. They weren't hiding that this is their goal, even though a global domination would not be something that they would ever be successful at. They were still successful in governing in different degrees against the will and wish of Lebanese and Iraqi citizens, for example, and Syrian citizens, and being part of their government. This is by definition imperialism. In fact, quite recently, the Lebanese government asked for the Islamic Republic's ambassador in Lebanon to leave, and they refused to do it, which is something that has never happened. An ambassador is only welcome in a country as long as the government of that country allows it. And this is the first time a government says you're not welcome here, and the ambassador was like, yep, I'm staying. This is an obvious example of the influence that the Islamic Republic has in Lebanon through Hezbollah, and how the army of the Islamic Republic in Lebanon is more powerful than the army that is supposed to represent the Lebanese people, that the one that they voted for, the government that they chose. And the two other non-Islamic versions are Putin's invasion of Ukraine and his ambitions in Eastern Europe, and the last one is China's claims over different territories in the South China Sea. All of these forces have a major obstacle in their path to imperialism, which is the United States. With the Islamic ones, it's the United States and Israel, but they all share United States as their enemy and a major barrier to their imperialist agenda. It's no wonder why you see a lot of cooperation between them, because they share the same enemy, which they call Western imperialism. This is the main reason why leftists and Muslims work with each other, because they share the same enemy, which is what they think is Western imperialism. But what they call Western imperialism, we call the New World Order, backed by United States economy, culture, and military, which has made the world a much more stable and safer place than ever in the history of civilization. The whole world owes the current levels of prosperity and stability that we have to the United States. And instead of being grateful, we constantly blame them as being evil and doing imperialism all around the world. We have never had it this good, and it is because of the United States. For the past 10,000 years of civilization, the world has never been this stable, this peaceful, this prosperous. The United States military is what makes international maritime trade possible, which is the backbone of the modern global economy. I don't think people could even imagine the type of the world that we would be living in if we didn't have this level of stability and security. I'm sure many of you disagree with me on this, so come talk to me about it in our discussion group, or if you agree with me, tell me and comment, tell me why as well. The link to the discussion group is in the description description and or the bio, or the QR code that I don't know where it is, somewhere around here. You can scan that and come to the discussion group and talk to me about all of this. The discussion group that we have is a really amazing political discussion group. Also, let me know in the comment sections if more topics like these are interesting to you, or if this video was educational. I use your comments to get motivated to make more videos like this, so let me know. My name is Armin Navabi. I'm Israel Chai. Long live America. Javid Shah. Payande Iran.